What if I told you that a biblical prophet made a prediction 4,000 years ago that came true with remarkable accuracy and may have shaped the rise and fall of the world's greatest empires, including ones that wouldn't exist for over 3 millennia? We're talking about a deathbed vision with historical evidence that's worth examining closely. Now, I should probably mention that some viewers will inevitably be offended by literally everything in this video. The AI images, some of the interpretations, who knows? To those people, I offer this profound wisdom. Get over it. The rest of us have fascinating history to explore. With that said, I'm Alex Arnold, and this is Arnie's Brain Train. Today we're going to examine a prophetic vision that outperformed many modern predictions. We're going to be diving into Jacob's prophetic moment that has theologians, historians, and researchers debating to this very day. Now, as always on this channel, we're here to present information without sugarcoating. We're going to talk documented facts, educated theories, and speculation, but I'll be clear about which is which. We're going to examine connections between biblical history and world politics that might challenge what you've been taught. All of my sources will be listed in the description or in the pinned comment below, so you can fact check every single claim that I make today. So let's uncover how Jacob's prophetic vision elevated two grandsons over their own uncles, created a mystery that historians are still trying to solve thousands of years later, and why some researchers think that this ancient prophecy might explain the rise and fall of entire empires, including ones that wouldn't exist for over 3,000 years. As always, let's start with some context. Let me paint you a picture of what the documented historical events looked like. It's ancient Egypt around 1800 BC, the same time period as Hammurabi's Code and the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. There's an old man named Jacob, also called Israel, lying on his deathbed. This is the man whose 12 sons are supposed to become the 12 tribes of Israel, the foundation of an entire nation. But here's where it gets interesting. Jacob calls his son Joseph over, one of the youngest sons. Remember that guy with the colorful coat who went from slave to prime minister of Egypt, controlling the grain supply of the ancient world's greatest superpower? Yeah, that guy. So Joseph brings his two sons, Manasseh, about 20 years old, and Ephraim, about 18. Here's what's significant to me. These boys were born in Egypt, raised in Egyptian culture, educated in Egyptian schools, probably spoke Egyptian as their first language, and their mother, Asenath, was the daughter of an Egyptian high priest. These kids likely knew more about Ra and Osiris than they did about Abraham and Isaac. According to every ancient tradition, Jacob should have blessed Joseph. Joseph then should have passed that blessing to his firstborn son, Manasseh. That's how inheritance worked in every culture, from Babylon to Egypt. But Jacob had other plans. Plans that even Joseph, who had interpreted Pharaoh's dreams and survived political intrigue, tried to physically stop. So here's what happened according to the record. Joseph carefully positions his sons so that Jacob's right hand, the hand of greater blessing in ancient Middle Eastern culture, would naturally fall on Manasseh, the older son. The firstborn gets the bigger blessing, the greater inheritance, the family leadership. This was universal law. But then Jacob did something that made Joseph try to physically correct his father's hands. According to Genesis chapter 48, verses 17 through 19, when Joseph saw his father place his right hand on Ephraim's head instead of Manasseh's, it displeased him. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. The tension in that room must have been significant. Joseph is essentially saying, "Dad, you're making a mistake." But Jacob refuses and delivers what can only be described as a prophetic declaration. He tells Joseph, "I know what I'm doing, son. Yes, Manasseh will be great, but his younger brother Ephraim will be greater, and his descendants will become a multitude of nations." But here's what most people miss. Jacob doesn't just bless these grandsons, he adopts them as his own sons. He declares in Genesis chapter 48 verse 5, "Your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are." This means that Jacob was basically throwing inheritance law out the window. He gave Joseph a double inheritance by making his grandsons equal to his own sons. In one moment, he turned two Egyptian-born teenagers into Hebrew patriarchs. This decision completely rewrote the map of ancient Israel and changed the power structure of the civilization. Instead of 12 tribes, there were now effectively 13, because Joseph's tribe split into two, Ephraim and Manasseh. This wasn't just symbolic, it had real-world consequences. Both became full tribes with their own territories and armies, but Ephraim became the dominant tribe in the northern kingdom of Israel. This is historically documented when the kingdom split after King Solomon's death, around 930 BC. Ephraim led the northern 10 tribes in rebellion against the south. The northern kingdom was sometimes called Ephraim instead of Israel in historical records. So consider what I said earlier. A boy born and raised in Egypt who probably knew more about Egyptian gods than Hebrew traditions, whose first language was probably Egyptian, became the political and military leader of most of the nation of Israel. Now, this may seem like it was random chance or political maneuvering, but it wasn't. Jacob's prophetic declaration specifically stated that Ephraim would become a multitude of nations, not just one powerful nation, but multiple nations. What did this biblical prophet see in his vision that led to this world-changing prophetic statement? There is additional context. At this time in history, Egypt was the undisputed superpower of the world. The Hebrews were refugees who had come to Egypt during a famine. So Jacob was blessing two boys who had every advantage that Egypt could offer: wealth, education, political connections, and then he was telling them to abandon all of that to lead a nomadic people. And they did it. Now here's where we transition from documented historical fact to educated theory and speculation, and I'll try to be clear about which is which. Here's the documented historical fact. After the Assyrian conquest in 722 BC, the 10 northern tribes, including Ephraim and Manasseh, disappeared from recorded history. The Assyrians had a policy of relocating entire populations to prevent rebellion. These are called the Lost Tribes of Israel, and their disappearance is one of archaeology's ongoing mysteries. And here's where it becomes educated theory based on historical migration patterns. They didn't just disappear. People don't just vanish. They went somewhere, and historians and biblical scholars have spent centuries trying to figure out where. Here's what some researchers theorize. Emphasis on theorize. These tribes may have migrated north and west through the Caucasus Mountains, possibly becoming ancestors to various Scythian peoples who later influenced European populations. Others suggest that they assimilated into existing cultures, but maintained some distinct practices. Now, here's where some researchers make another connection. Remember Jacob's prophecy that Ephraim would become a multitude of nations? Some British-Israeli theorists point to the British Empire, which, at its height, controlled about 25% of the world's landmass and ruled over hundreds of millions of people, as a possible fulfillment of this ancient prophecy. They suggest that Britain represents Ephraim and America represents Manasseh. Now, is this true? Nobody knows definitively. But what makes it interesting to examine, the timing, the maritime focus of both ancient Ephraim and modern Britain, and the unprecedented global reach, it's speculative, but it's not random speculation. So let's go back and examine the real question. Why did Jacob make this decision? What did he know that others didn't? This wasn't family favoritism, this was prophetic foresight on a level that defies normal human understanding. Jacob wasn't just a patriarch, he was considered a prophet by ancient standards, someone who received divine revelation about future events. Here's a documented historical fact. Ephraim and Manasseh were half Egyptian. Their mother was Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, also called Heliopolis, one of Egypt's most important religious centers. These boys had Egyptian royal blood, Egyptian elite education, Egyptian political connections, and Egyptian religious training. Yet Jacob chose them, not his pure Hebrew sons, to carry the covenant forward. This tells us something significant about what Jacob valued, and here's my interpretation based on the evidence. It wasn't racial purity or cultural tradition that mattered to Jacob. It was adaptability, character, and the ability to thrive in foreign environments while maintaining core identity. Consider the prophetic brilliance of this. By the time Jacob made this decision, him and his family had been living in Egypt for 17 years. He could see, through what can only be described as prophetic vision, that the future of his people would depend on their ability to adapt, to work within foreign systems, to be in the world but not of it. He chose the two boys who had already proven that they could maintain Hebrew identity while excelling in Egyptian culture. But here's where it gets remarkable. Jacob didn't just make a good strategic choice. He made a prophetic declaration that has been playing out for nearly 4,000 years. When he said Ephraim would become a multitude of nations, he wasn't guessing. He was prophesying. And if the British Israel theories have any validity whatsoever, we're looking at one of the most accurate long-term prophecies in human history. This story shows us that sometimes the most important decisions look completely wrong to everyone around us. Joseph thought his father was making a mistake. The other brothers probably thought it was unfair. But Jacob was operating on prophetic knowledge that went far beyond human understanding. Fast forward thousands of years, and we're still talking about this decision. Why? Because it worked. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh became some of the most influential in Israel's history. Ephraim produced Joshua, the military leader who conquered the Promised Land. The tabernacle was set up in Ephraim's territory at Shiloh for over 300 years. When Israel needed a fresh start after the monarchy failed, it was often Ephraim leading the charge. Manasseh, meanwhile, did become known for their warriors and their territory that stretched on both sides of the Jordan River, the only tribe to have land on both sides. But here's the fun part. If the theories about the lost tribes are even partially correct, then Jacob's deathbed decision didn't just change ancient Israel, it potentially shaped the entire course of Western civilization. Think about the timing. Jacob made this decision around 1800 BC. The British Empire didn't reach its peak until the 1800s AD. That's 3,600 years later. If there's any connection at all, we're talking about a prophecy that took over 3.5 millennia to fully play out. Whether you believe in the lost tribe theories or not, you have to admit, Jacob's decision to elevate his Egyptian-born grandsons over his own sons was either the work of a prophet who could see thousands of years into the future, which is exactly what biblical traditions claim he was, or the most impossibly lucky guess in human history. Given that he correctly predicted Ephraim would surpass Manasseh, that both would become great tribes, that Ephraim would become a multitude of nations, and that this blessing would change the entire structure of Israel, I'm leaning toward the prophetic explanation. Let's take one last look at these connections and summarize everything just like we do in every video. First, Jacob's decision demonstrates that heritage isn't just about bloodlines, it's about character and calling. Ephraim and Manasseh weren't pure Israelites by blood, but they became the most influential leaders of Israel. That's documented historical fact. Second, sometimes controversial decisions in the moment prove correct over time. Everyone thought Jacob was wrong in that moment, but 3,000 years of history validated his choice. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh became powerhouses. Third, this story demonstrates that prophetic plans, whether you believe in them or not, often work through unexpected people in unexpected ways. Two boys raised in Egyptian palace culture became the leaders of Hebrew nomadic tribes. Now here's where we enter the educated speculation territory. If the British Israel theories have merit, and I emphasize that this is theoretical, then this decision changed the course of world history. The multitude of nations that Jacob prophesied over Ephraim might have included the British Empire, which shaped modern democracy, spread English as a global language, and created the foundation for American independence. Consider the timeline one more time. Jacob made this prophetic declaration around 1800 BC. The British Empire didn't reach its peak until the 1800s AD. That's 3,600 years. If there's any connection at all, and this is pure speculation, we're talking about a prophecy with the longest fulfillment period in human history. That's not strategic thinking, that's prophetic vision on a scale that should make every historian and theologian pay attention. Here's the practical takeaway. Never underestimate the ripple effects of a single decision. Jacob's choice echoed through millennia. The decisions you make today about your values, your priorities, your legacy, they might have consequences spanning generations. The mystery of Ephraim and Manasseh teaches us that history contains hidden connections, that underdogs often win in the long run, and that sometimes controversial choices create extraordinary outcomes. We'll park the brain train here because that's today's examination of biblical prophecy and controversial theories. If this video made you consider what you thought you knew about ancient prophecies, modern world powers, and how decisions can echo through millennia, then this content has done its job. Remember, I've done my best to clearly separate historical facts from educated theories, from speculation throughout this video, and I've listed all my sources in the description and in the pinned comment below so that you can research further and form your own conclusions. Whether you believe the British-Israeli theories or consider them unfounded, the documented accuracy of Jacob's prophetic vision about ancient Israel is worth examining. If you want to see me explore other controversial historical connections or tackle different mysteries that mainstream education avoids, let me know in the comments. Subscribe to Arnie's Brain Train and help me grow so we can make better content together. Don't forget to hit that notification bell because we're constantly uncovering historical mysteries, prophetic connections, controversial theories, and hidden links between ancient visions and modern events. Until then, keep questioning everything, keep researching for yourself, keep thinking critically about what you're taught versus what the evidence shows, and remember, the world isn't always this simple, but it's always this interesting. All aboard the brain train. See you guys next time. Bye.